A mission around the moon. You see it right there, nearly 24 hours until that mission, the first one in more than 50 years. So if the Artemis II rocket takes off tomorrow as planned, the 3-man, 1-woman crew inside will travel farther from the Earth than any humans before. You can see that slingshot right there, more than 4,100 miles. That would, if you're keeping track, surpass the mark set by the Apollo 13 crew back in 1970. NASA's holding a news conference about that mission right now. Was just asked about the possibility of an April Fool's joke. Take a listen.
You know, there's a long history dating back to the Apollo era guys of pulling pranks on launch day with the launch team and with the launch team pulling pranks on the flight crew. And given that tomorrow is April 1st, I was wondering if, maybe without spoiling anything, if there's been any talk about that or whether there's actually been a decision to not do that and stay away from that.
So I am not aware of any pranks that anybody intends to pull on the flight crew or in the launch team itself. So I think I'll just leave it at that. But I'm not aware of any, and I'm hoping that we just stay focused on the launch tomorrow. So that's our plan.
Okay, that's our plan. Listen up, pranksters. Just don't. Live to CBS News senior national correspondent Mark Strassman from Kennedy Space Center. Mark, this is a prelude to the big act. What are you seeing there?
A prelude, but no pranks here either, Reed. I can tell you that much. A prelude that has real significance here. I mean, in that same briefing, they came up with an updated weather forecast, still about 80%, which they've been very optimistic about, for 80% favorable chance of conditions for launch tomorrow. The rocket's ready to go. The crew in quarantine is ready to go. NASA officials have been consistently upbeat all week, Read, about the chances of a launch tomorrow. So no guarantees, none whatsoever. But from here, it's looking good that we could have the launch of Artemis II, the first piloted moon mission in 53 years since Apollo 17 in 1972. And that will open up a new era of human spaceflight for NASA.
I can't wait to see the pictures, and we know that you're telling all of this to us on good authority because you spoke to the NASA administrator, Jared Isaacman, about the mission. What did he have to say?
Yeah, it was in fact, we were standing right in this very spot about 3 hours ago or so, and he came on by, and you know, he's been in this job now for 3 months. He's already shaken up the whole Artemis program. They were going to have a moon landing with Artemis III, and now it's going to be Artemis IV. And so I just asked him, what is it that, how is it that you will define success with this launch that we're all hoping to have tomorrow?
This is the opening act in a series of missions that will send astronauts to and from the moon with great frequency as we return to stay, to build the moon base, and again, realize the scientific and economic potential on the lunar surface.
How do you define success with this mission?
You've got 4 very brave astronauts that know that they are taking risks beyond any astronaut has ever done since 1972. So we want to bring our crew home safely.
What about you talking to the crew? Have you had chats with them? Text with them?
I text them all the time. You need DoorDash, you need donuts, you need coffee, I'm here for you.
Yeah, it's his goal, of course, is he wants to make sure that these 4 astronauts are as stress-free as possible today, because tomorrow's going to be a big one. Let's face it, Reed. I mean,
right.
It's going to be, you know, a challenging day, for everyone, and he just wants to make sure that these guys have everything they need today and get a good night's sleep, because, as I say, tomorrow's the big one.
They're going to be making history. All right, they better double up on that DoorDash promise. I would. Mark Strassman, can't wait to see your coverage tomorrow. And like I say, cannot wait to see the images fed back to terra firma. Always good to talk to you, friend.
Why is this mission important?
Well, I think it's important because we're fulfilling a promise that began more than 35 years ago for America's return to the moon as a stepping stone for all the things that we are going to do farther out into our solar system, like someday American astronauts planning the stars and stripes on Mars. So you're doing it for the scientific potential, the economic potential, as a technological proving ground to do the things on the moon that you're going to need on Mars. And how about inspiring the next generation? I mean, how many kids after this mission are going to dress up as astronauts for Halloween and want to grow up and contribute to this great adventure?
What are expectations for tomorrow. It's a test flight.
For sure.
You hope to get to the moon, might not happen. So what are, for people who don't quite understand what the test flight is about, what are the expectations for this?
I mean, you really said it best. This is a test flight. This is the opening act in a series of missions that will send astronauts to and from the moon with great frequency as we return to stay, to build the moon base, and again, realize the scientific and economic potential on the lunar surface. So this first mission, this is extremely challenging. You know, you go to the International Space Station, that's 1.8 million pounds of thrust, 17,500 miles an hour. This is 8.8 million pounds of thrust. These astronauts are going to go farther from Earth than any humans have ever been before, potentially faster than any humans have ever been before. When you commit to TLI and you send them to the moon, you're no longer hours away from coming back to the water. So we need to use this as an opportunity to test out the vehicle, gain confidence for subsequent missions. We'll launch again in 2027 to test the integrated operations of this spaceship with the lander. And then 2028, we're going to the surface of the moon.
How do you define success with this mission?
Well, I think first and foremost is when they're under parachute splashing down off the west coast of the United States. I mean, you know, you've got 4 very brave astronauts that know that they are taking risks beyond any astronaut has ever done since 1972. So we want to bring our crew home safely. I would say getting to the translunar injection. So this rocket will initially put Orion into a parking Earth orbit. Then we will raise it into a high Earth orbit. We'll be there for about 24 hours. We'll get really comfortable that we're ready. And then we push the button, translunar injection. We're sending that spacecraft farther into space than ever before. That is going to be a very key moment on the mission. We complete that. They come around the moon on the free return trajectory. They splash down off the west coast.
Does this crew have to loop around the moon for this mission to be a success?
I would say that that's probably one of the most important objectives is commit to the translunar injection. Now, even after we commit to that, there are off-ramps. They can turn around and come home if necessary. We have that ability with this spacecraft. But I would say the most important part of the mission is when they're under parachutes and splashing down safely off the coast of, off the west coast of the United States.
Priority 1, bring them home safely.
Yes, sir.
What about you talking to the crew? Have you had chats with them, texted with them?
Oh yeah. So we have a text thread. I mean, I've known this crew for a very long time, long before I was ever in this job. Victor Glover, who's the pilot on this mission, he flew the spacecraft before I did on Inspiration 4 and Polaris. So we have some connections going way back. I text them all the time. You need DoorDash, you need donuts, you need coffee. I'm here for you. You need to go fly in the T-38s. I can make that happen. Mostly making sure they have everything they need so they're not stressing about things here on Earth when their attention needs to be placed towards the mission ahead.
You know, you shook things up a couple of weeks ago. What was supposed to be Artemis 3 is now Artemis 4. Artemis 3 is going to be, you know, this rehearsal in low Earth orbit. So let's talk about lunar. You can't do any of that without the lunar lander.
That's right.
What is the latest on the timeline for either Blue Origin or SpaceX to deliver a lunar orbiter?
Yeah, so what did we change, right? So now here you have Artemis II, which is about to fly around the moon. Now Artemis I, which was an uncrewed demonstration, flew in November of 2022. So here we are, 2026, we're going to fly around the moon, and then we were supposed to do nothing until late 2028, fly again, and land on the moon. That's not how it works. You know, before there was Apollo 11, there was Mercury program, there was Gemini. We build up to things logically, we learn, we buy down risk to give us the confidence to go even farther. We're getting back in that business. So in 2027, we will launch SLS again. This time, the Orion spacecraft will rendezvous with one or both landers, very Apollo 9-like, buy down risk. I will tell you both landing providers, so Blue Origin and SpaceX, have submitted proposals on how to accelerate their program. NASA's been very helpful too. We're taking a look at where we could have imposed, requirements that are more appropriate for the 7th mission to the moon, maybe not necessarily the first one. So we're working collaboratively with them. Both of them have signaled they will be there to support the test in 2027. Both have an achievable timeline for a lander in 2028.
As somebody who's been through this experience in the past before, what part of launch day makes you most nervous?
Well, I would say that there is, when people see astronauts going to and from the space station, what appears almost routinely now, that is a load and go. So meaning the astronauts are already strapped into the Dragon spacecraft, they're already on the pad, and their launch escape system is armed before you ever put the rocket fuel, the propellant, on the vehicle. SLS is very similar to how we did it prior to Falcon, which was how the shuttle program did it, certainly how the Apollo era did it as well, meaning that rocket is live and fueled when the astronauts and the crew are approaching it. So that's something we don't do all the time. We're getting back in that business of launching rockets with frequency. It's why I want us on an annual cadence, to rebuild that kind of muscle memory, but that's different, so that's something we're going to pay close attention to.
All right, nearly 24 hours until the scheduled launch of the first crewed mission around the moon in more than 50 years. If the Artemis II rocket takes off tomorrow as planned, the 3-man, 1-woman crew inside will travel farther from the Earth than any humans before, more than 4,100 miles. That would surpass the mark set by the Apollo 13 crew back in 1970. Joining us live from the Kennedy Space Center is Bloomberg space reporter Lauren Grush. Lauren, great to be with you. It's been more than half a century since astronauts set foot on the moon. It was a huge moment in U.S. history. Why are we doing a mission like this again? Is this still about a space race with China and Russia at this point?
Well, I think it depends on who you ask. Definitely lawmakers and White House officials will say that there's a great urgency to beat China back to the moon. China has its own ambitions of putting humans on the surface of the moon. So we want to get back there again. Remember, we were there first, but we want to get back there again before they do. And the idea is that maybe if China gets there first, they could somehow prevent us from exploring the moon in the way that we would like to explore it, maybe by setting up some kind of perimeter or something like that. Obviously, that's a hypothetical scenario, but something that lawmakers and military officials are worried about. But when it comes to NASA, you know, exploration and a flagship human spaceflight mission like this is in NASA's DNA. You know, the Apollo program essentially, you know, put NASA on the map. And so, you know, after decades of, you know, kind of sending astronauts to low Earth orbit with the space shuttle and the International Space Station, there's like the sense that it's time to move on, and the moon is the most logical next destination for that.
And how is this mission setting up an even bigger mission to Mars?
So the plan with this program, the Artemis program, which is the twin goddess of Apollo, is they don't want to do what they did last time where they just left flags and footprints. The idea for this mission is to live sustainably on the moon, to see what it takes to live on another planetary body. And so those lessons that we learn from keeping humans alive on the surface of the moon, that could one day be applied to Mars. You know, the moon is a great testing ground because it's closer, and we have, you know, easier communication with the moon because it's relatively close. But that's going to get significantly harder when we go to Mars, and Mars is much farther away. There's no easy way to evacuate Mars, and the communication time will vary greatly depending on where Mars is on its orbit. So we're going to have to know how to be much more autonomous on the surface of Mars, and the moon will be a great way to test out those capabilities before we are essentially on our own out there.
Fascinating. And I want to talk about the logistics of the mission itself, because even if there is a successful launch tomorrow, there's a checklist that needs to be completed before each milestone of this mission. If at any point on that checklist that is not met, do they have to abort the mission and come home?
Yeah, there are certainly various parameters that they need to be able to meet in order to conduct a very successful mission. And at each point along the way, there are various abort opportunities. So during the launch itself, there are ways, you know, if there's something wrong with the rocket, there's a launch escape system that will carry the crew to safety. And then at some point, you know, when they get to Earth orbit, they can decide if there's some kind of technical issue, if they actually want to execute that translunar injection burn that puts them on course to the moon. If they don't do that, then they'll just spend time in orbit and they'll bring the crew back home. Obviously, that's not an ideal scenario, but they have that capability as well. Once they conduct that translunar injection burn that sends them onto the moon, then it becomes a bit of diminishing returns on whether or not they can, you know, abort from that and come home. They're basically playing with gravity here, the moon's gravity and the Earth's gravity. And at some point, the Earth is going to bring them back around again. So there's kind of diminishing returns on breaking free from that trajectory. But they're not going to make that decision to do that burn unless they're very confident that everything is going smoothly.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to be a very exciting day tomorrow. Lauren Grush, thank you so much for being with us.
We are approaching nearly 24 hours until the scheduled launch of the first crewed mission around the moon in more than 50 years. And good news, the forecast so far is showing favorable weather conditions for the launch. If the Artemis II rocket takes off tomorrow as planned, the three-man, one-woman crew inside will travel further from Earth than any human before. That's more than 4,100 miles. It would surpass the mark set by the Apollo 13 crew back in 1970. And joining us live right now is Lakiesha Hawkins. She is the acting deputy associate administrator for NASA's Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate. Lakiesha, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. So you help manage human spaceflight development for the Artemis mission. What has been some of the most challenging and even rewarding moments up until this point?
Good morning, and I'm excited to be here from Kennedy Space Center. I'll tell you, one of the most rewarding moments is where we are right now. I am doing everything that I can to be present in this moment to support this four-person crew who are getting ready to make history. They are getting ready to embark upon a 10-day mission that will take us to the vicinity of the moon further than we've ever been before, and then open up the door for our next Artemis missions and the establishment of a moon base. We are on the verge of what history is going to take us to next.
And when you put it that way, I can feel the goosebumps, and I'm really excited about this. Can you tell us what kind of research or discoveries your team hopes to make in sending humans around the moon?
Sure, absolutely. So our first Artemis mission was an uncrewed mission, right? It showed that the systems worked as they should, the rocket worked as it should, right? This is the first time that we are going to be sending humans, our friends, Christina Cook and Victor Glover, Reed Wiseman, and our Canadian partner, Jeremy Hansen. And so we are going to make sure that the life support systems work as they should. We're going to make sure that they can maneuver and conduct the spacecraft, which is going to be very important when we get ready to dock with a lander that will take it to the surface of the moon, and then making sure that we have the capability to send the spacecraft on a proper trajectory around the moon. While we're there, they're also going to be doing biology experiments on the crew members themselves to understand how their bodies react to being in space for long durations, as well as observations of the moon itself in preparation for landing. They will have a perspective that no human eye has ever seen before. They will be further from the moon, and they'll be on the backside of the moon. It'll look like a basketball held at arm's length, and they'll be able to see both the north and the south pole of the moon. We can't wait for their reports and the images that they'll bring back to us.
Yeah, and Lakiesha, as we have seen before, last-minute delays can happen. So how does NASA make sure a rocket of this size and significance stays on track for the launch, especially with safety being the top priority, of course?
Safety is absolutely our top priority, and in order to be able to support that, we have done a lot of practice. Everything from simulations of the operations team, all of the safety checks of the hardware, as well as what we call wet dress rehearsals. And then we've also just given ourselves a few days to make sure that if we're not ready to go this first day, we will go when the systems and the people and the weather say that we're ready. So we're all poised for tomorrow, but if the weather doesn't cooperate or something that we learn that pushes and delays us, there we have some future opportunities in the coming days in order to execute. We're doing everything when safety tells us it is the proper time to go.
Fingers crossed for a very, very successful trip there. Lakiesha Hawkins, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
In less than 24 hours, 4 astronauts are set to begin their historic 9-day journey around the far side of the moon and back. The latest forecast shows the weather at Florida's Kennedy Space Center is holding steady for the Artemis II launch with an 80% chance of favorable conditions. If the mission is given the all clear, it will be the first crew to head to the moon since the Apollo 17 flight that landed there more than 50 years ago. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman told CBS News' Mark Strassman he's been texting with the crew while they're in quarantine. He says he's offered to get them DoorDash deliveries, donuts, coffee, whatever else they need to help them de-stress before liftoff.
I think it's important because we're fulfilling a promise that began more than 35 years ago for America's return to the moon as a stepping stone for all the things that we are going to do farther out into our solar system, like someday American astronauts planting the stars and stripes on Mars.
For more, let's bring in CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood. So, Bill, what does the final day of preps look like for NASA and for the crew?
Well, DoorDash aside, it's quite busy for the launch team. You know, they're going to be getting the rocket ready for fuel loading. That's the really major event in this countdown, when they pump that liquid hydrogen and oxygen back into the Space Launch System rocket. If you remember, in early February during a dress rehearsal countdown, that's when leaks showed up that caused delays and a lot of head scratching. They think they've got that fixed. They think the rocket is good to go. And so we'll find that out tomorrow morning. If they can gas it up, no leaks, then the crew's going to strap in and wait for launch and hope the weather cooperates. But right now, as you said, everything's looking pretty good.
What will you be watching from a technical standpoint? Is it really just listening to that live narration of the gassing up process?
Absolutely. You know, we're going to pay a lot of attention to fueling, but you also have to think a bit ahead about what are you going to be doing as soon as they take off. This is an incredibly busy first day in space for the astronauts. You know, it's the first time the Orion crew capsules ever carried astronauts. So this is really a test flight, and the first day in space is going to be devoted to testing that capsule, making absolutely sure it's rock solid before they fire its thrusters to head for the moon. If you think about it, we all like to get 6 or 8 hours of sleep a night. For this first day in space, the astronauts are going to get one period of 4 hours to nap, then they have to wake up for a rocket firing, then they get another 4 hours. So it's an incredibly long day for the crew. But hopefully it all goes well. They've certainly trained hard enough for it.
Yeah, can you imagine trying to sleep on that? You're like in space. I can't imagine. I would think they're all so giddy. Yeah. All right, so tough. If everything goes well, give us a rundown of what we can expect tomorrow.
Fueling, crew boarding, wait on the weather. I mean, those are the 3 big highlights, and hopefully they're all going to converge for an on-time launch.
We'll talk to you then. Bill Harwood, thanks so much.
Welcome back to the Takeout, and welcome back to our specially themed Artemis II set. I love it so. And of course, our Bill Nye, the Science Guy tie here on the jukebox in honor of Bill Nye, the Science Guy. This time tomorrow, we will be counting down the minutes, not the hours anymore, the minutes, until scheduled liftoff. Scheduled is an important word. Artemis II crewed mission around the moon. Retired NASA astronaut and Navy SEAL Chris Cassidy joins me now. Those beautifully framed pictures you see around him, his adventures in space. Chris, I'm delighted to talk to you. Lots of notes on this mission. This one caught my eye. When this happens, 74% of today's global population will not be living during the Apollo era. So it has no living memory of what this is like. So we are going to re-excite an entire globe about what it means to take a risk and do an adventure like this.
Major, it's great to be with you. And you are spot on. That's exactly right. There is so much inspiration that can come out of this. In fact, Reed Wiseman, who's the commander of the mission, is a good friend of mine. I texted him the other day and said, good luck, my friend. The whole world is watching with awe and excitement. And that is exactly the sentiment that you're getting at. With about 3/4 of our population never saw a rocket go to the moon before, and now they will.
And what is so important about this particular mission? Because as I understand it, and I've been reading a lot about it, it's to test all the things necessary to go back to the moon and begin to stay on the moon.
Right. It's really an exciting time. Just last week, NASA announced a real change in the direction that we're going with our nation's kind of strategic vision for space exploration, and that's to put permanent presence on the lunar surface. We're no longer going after a lunar space station, if you will, called Gateway. And this is the first step in that. Just like you airplanes, when they come out of the Boeing factory, they fly for a test flight before they put paying customers for a commercial airliner on there. This is that same way. Apollo 8 did the same thing for Apollo 11, went around the moon, made sure everything was right, very close to the lunar surface, could reach out and touch it, so to speak, but didn't land. We don't happen to have a lander built yet or suits that you can walk on the moon. Those are kind of 2 critical pieces of it. But this is a critical first step in making it so where we can have people walking on the moon again.
And what's very interesting about this, and there's a lot of terminology that's important. This mission will not orbit the moon. It will fly a free return trajectory, and it will go farther, as I understand it, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, farther away from Earth than ever before.
Yeah, that's right. And there's, I'm not an astrophysicist or anything, but there's once you leave Earth orbit, leave Earth orbit, you can utilize lunar gravitational pull, which does exist. It's a sixth of what we have here on Earth, and use that to slingshot you back to Earth. And so the beauty of that in terms of risk mitigation is if there's some sort of engine malfunction or on this kind of test flight, if you will, that capsule is coming back to Earth without doing anything else. So, I mean, I'm oversimplifying it. There's a lot that the qualified and fabulous people, men and women in mission control, do to make it safe. But you gain a lot of safety factors by having a profile like it is.
Chris Cassidy, I appreciate the time so very much. Congratulations on all your service to NASA, and we'll all be watching tomorrow.
And joining us live from the Kennedy Space Center, Tariq Malik, editor-in-chief of Space.com. Tariq, it has been more than half a century since astronauts set foot on the moon, a huge moment in U.S. history. So can you touch on the significance of doing this all again? And is this still a big space race?
You know, Juliet, I think that is one of the key things that NASA has riding on this mission. Last week, we heard from Jared Isaacman, the NASA administrator, that they have a new and focused sweeping plan, not just to return astronauts to the moon by 2028, but to build a permanent moon base that could be a springboard for going to Mars. Very ambitious, many, many launches, but the hinge of all of them is, can NASA still get astronauts to the moon and back safely? And that's what this mission Artemis II is all about. It's the first crewed launch of this new mega rocket NASA has, the Space Launch System, the first crewed flight of the Orion spacecraft. And it's been more than 3 years since these two vehicles flew an uncrewed test flight with no astronauts aboard. So they've got a lot of new upgrades to test, and hopefully we'll see our first views of the moon since 1972, Apollo 17.
Amazing. Okay, so how is this mission then setting up an even bigger mission to the Mars?
Yeah, NASA is hoping to take a stepping stone approach. And as I mentioned, Jared Isaacman, the NASA chief, basically reorganized that whole plan. NASA had hoped to land astronauts on the moon actually several years ago, and the program has been delayed. So this is really the jumpstart, the kind of kick in the pants NASA is hoping to get all of the missions to come after flowing in regular succession. They need to make sure that the spacecraft is safe to fly, that it can support astronauts for up to a month at a time for these missions that are going to go to the moon. They need to make sure that the heat shield, which is really important, is robust enough to protect these astronauts through the searing heat of reentry 10 days after their mission. And then we need to know what that environment is like. They're going to test space radiation shelters, other types of medical diagnostics, even like the cameras they use, like how to observe the moon, something we haven't done in over 50 years.
So I'm always intrigued by the logistics in the mission itself, the checklist before it even happens. Can you touch on that? What needs to be completed before each milestone of this mission? And at what point do they say, all right, we can't do this. We have to scrap it?
Yeah, you know, the first 48 hours of this mission are extremely key, because that is when the Orion spacecraft is really getting its shakedown to make sure that it's safe to fly astronauts. So in that period, they're going to go into a really high orbit around the Earth, and these astronauts are going to make sure that the kitchen is working, the galley they have, that the environmental systems that, you know, takes care of their temperature, their air, everything that they need to survive is working, that the water systems, they even have a toilet on board, something the Apollo astronauts didn't have, and they want to make sure that that's working too. So, you know, if it passes all of those checks, they'll go to the next stage, which is to hopefully do some rendezvous checks with their upper stage, and to make sure that they can dock in the future with a spacecraft that will take them to the moon or to land on the moon. And then after that, NASA hopes to, you know, check all their boxes and say, yes, you are go for the moon. And when they hit that engine to ignite for that translunar injection, that's it. They're on a trip around the moon, and it's going to bring them straight back as well.
Oh, fascinating, exciting. Let's talk about the crew members. What is their daily life like? And honestly, what are they eating? What are they doing? Walk us through that.
Well, we know that the kind of creature comforts when it comes to living in space has come a long way since the Apollo era of the 60s and the 70s. So NASA's had about 25 plus years of experience working with their partners on the International Space Station to refine a lot of the amenities. So like I mentioned, they have a toilet, something that they haven't had before. So that will be a little bit of a comfort that they've tested on the space station. They have a lot of different food items, including I think some unique Canadian treats that the Jeremy Hansen, the Canadian astronaut, is taking aboard that they can enjoy on the way. But they have a food warmer. They can have warm food. They can have drinks as well. They will also have to exercise. They're going to test what NASA hopes will be a good exercise system for trips to the moon to make sure they don't lose as much muscle mass, as much bone density as you could on a long duration flight.
Before we go, tell me your excitement level.
I've been waiting for this mission, since NASA first said they were going to go back to the moon back in 2004. And finally, we're going to get a chance to see this actually happen. I was in the audience when Jared Isaacman announced that new ignition plan to try to revitalize this moon program in order to make things achievable in a stepping stone approach. And it's extremely exciting to kind of be at that point to see there. Like you mentioned, 400,000 people are here. The people in my hotel alone are really excited too, and they can't stop talking about it.
Oh, how neat. Oh, we will definitely circle back with you, Tariq. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will have special coverage of the Artemis II launch on Wednesday, right here on CBS News 24/7.